Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. Yesterday, the first trailer dropped for Eli Roth's The Green Inferno, and at first I was quite excited to review it because it's quite a departure for Eli Roth, or at least so I thought. But anyway, as you're about to find out, I ultimately decided not to review, I'm going to review it kind of here, but not to show the trailer itself. I usually show the full trailer and then include a review because I kind of felt that it was irresponsible of me to continue to promote torture porn. I felt that I kind of needed to take a stand here, and I wanted to explain that to you today, and also just to explore torture porn in general. Is it valid entertainment? Does it take away from films that would be more important? In this case, with this film, The Green Inferno, did Eli Roth go the commercial route at the expense of making perhaps a much more sophisticated and intellectual film? And as I said, torture porn as entertainment, is it responsible to be made and for the media to promote it, even if we consider that the making of it a mistake? Are we just compounding that mistake by bringing it out to the public and trying to push it on people? I was partially inspired by the thought process I'm about to go through with you on the trailer, but also yesterday somebody mentioned that I had warned people not to watch Old Boy. I still haven't gotten over watching that film because it was so disturbing. And someone had said, "Oh, Grace, I watched it anyway because I was intrigued by the fact that you had been so disturbed by it, but now I'm sorry that I saw it." And I really felt bad that someone had to go through the same thing, because I'm still not over having seen that movie, and I really feel that I should not have seen it. And so I'm not talking about horror films like Oculus, by the way, which we talked about over the weekend. That is not in the same ballpark as what we're going to go and delve into here with The Green Inferno. So anyway, The Green Inferno is this upcoming horror film from Eli Roth. He's returning to behind the camera after doing a couple of stints in front of it. Of course, he's the creator and director of the Hostel series franchise that competed with Saw back in the day. So he's decided to make this movie about a group of New York teenagers who travel to the Amazon in the hopes of saving a tribe from endangerment or something. But basically, the short of it is they become victims of cannibalism, and it's a long, drawn out, of course, obviously, torture porn scenario. So in the trailers, I was intrigued with this synopsis. First, I guess I'll start with that, because this mirrors, I don't know if it's intentional or not on the part of Eli Roth, but it mirrors a recent news story, and that is the continued investigation of what happened to Michael Rockefeller. If you're not familiar with the story of Michael Rockefeller, he's the son from the famous Rockefeller family. Nelson Rockefeller was his father, I believe. I've actually been to the Rockefeller estate in upstate New York. It's fascinating to see kind of signs of the old European class system here in the United States. It's a beautiful estate with a wonderful art collection. And the Rockefellers were very interested in art, and their son Michael became very interested in primitive art. And he decided to go to help build up their collection, their family's collection. They've often toured at museums and such. I believe he was actually searching for a museum. I don't quite recall. But he decided to go to New Guinea, which at the time was controlled by the Netherlands. And anyway, while he was there, he was quite young. This was the 1960s. He disappeared. And everyone came to believe that he had drowned, because his boat, I believe, had lost power or something, and he and his partner had become stranded, and he'd swam to shore to go for help. So people thought he'd either drowned or been eaten by a crocodile. Regardless, Michael Rockefeller never came back from New Guinea. But a couple of stories, but a recent very popular book that came out, got a lot of headlines, really tried to prove the theory that he'd actually been the victim of cannibalism, and that he'd swam ashore, and one of the local tribes, ironically, that Michael Rockefeller had been there to document and to take their, I'm sure to rightfully acquire their artwork to share with the rest of the world, that they had eaten him, and that his shrunken head was on display in one of their tribal houses, and that the Netherlands government had covered this up in New Guinea because they didn't want it to look like they had lost control of the situation. And while this had been, I believe, reported to the Rockefellers, I guess they did not want to even contemplate that this was the fate of their son. And it's a tragic story, but also an interesting story about traveling into the heart of darkness. Another take on obviously that famous classic story about Kurtz, that was made into Apocalypse Now, but also wealth and privilege, feeling that they're to some degree invulnerable to the dangers of the world. And I think that, so you have these kids from New York, I kind of thought maybe this is where this movie would be going. And as the trailer started, I was very impressed with the production values. And I thought that Eli Roth was really stepping up his game, and that's always exciting to me when any talent steps up their game, because you always want to strive to be better. So that was great. But then as the trailer continued, it became clear that this was going to be a really drawn out, as I said, depiction of these people being cooked and eaten alive while, as I said, while they're alive, and just really disgusting to watch and just really appalling. And clearly they were going to draw it out and we'll eat one kid now at the halfway point of the movie, and then maybe they'll try to escape, we'll eat another one, and then we'll leave the last one. Typical horror stuff, but taken to a revolting degree. But at first I thought, well, this is interesting. It'll bring to light the Michael Rockefeller story. But I thought, I don't know if that's a very tough and sophisticated line to walk, and I don't know if Eli Roth is capable of doing that. Especially because when I'm seeing from the trailer, you don't need to show the actual eating of the person. You can show the capture, the killing, and then cut to that shrunken head and really make the same point. I don't need to see someone disemboweled while they're alive over a steak, or a pit in a steak, as it seems to be hinted at this trailer. So I started to think, well, who would actually want to sit and watch something like this? This is very disturbing. And then I was reminded of another recent news story in New York City, at least. I don't know if it's ever made the national or worldwide news. And that's the Cannibal Cop. And that's a policeman here in New York City whose wife discovered that he was going onto online message boards and talking with other people in the country about how to kidnap. He was making plans to kidnap women and torture them and cook them and eat them. And he had made extensive plans. He had targeted people. He's saying this was all just a fantasy, and I believe that's the cornerstone of the defense for him. And that at what point do someone's morbid fantasies become so real to them, I guess. That's the line they're trying to place. When does someone's fantasy become real enough to be prosecuted? And they're saying this gentleman never acted on, these fantasies, but the prosecution is arguing they were so vivid and they involved real people that, obviously we arrested him before he could potentially, put them into effect. So maybe he would have done them. We don't know. We arrested him before. And that's always a long, ongoing argument about when to arrest somebody if you have evidence that they're going to commit a crime. Do you just watch them and wait until they're about to do it? Or if they're such a danger to people? And it's very terrifying, especially being a New Yorker and being a woman. This is horrifying to think about that anybody would think this was a good idea. Now, obviously, people who actually want to commit cannibalism and these horrible acts is a very small part of the population, minuscule. That doesn't make them not a threat, but it's not enough to make an audience for a film. And Hostel did pretty well. They were able to make a few of them. Saw did well. And the recent Evil Dead film did pretty well. So there is an audience for this. So no judgments here, by the way. I just felt uncomfortable perpetrating this film and sharing it with people, especially because I had just read a bunch of those horrible comments about the South Korean ferry that had capsized and the final text messages people were sending. And it was just it was like a perfect storm of just horrible, grim, life is so hard and terrifying enough. Do we really need that reflected in our entertainment for purely entertainment purposes with no deeper meaning or education there or, thought? So that's why I decided not to show the Green Inferno trailer. I just felt at the end of the day it was too disturbing. But I'm curious to those of you who maybe have seen it and are intrigued. And maybe what am I not understanding about torture porn? That's kind of also what as I said, I wanted to put out here. And again, no judgments. This is a perfectly valid I've made this decision. I'm curious how other people feel about my decision. If they feel it was not, I shouldn't be, judging films like that. Is it not my place to draw a line in the sand as to what's appropriate and what's not? That's an argument that sometimes the media does use, saying we are just, we're the middleman. We are not, we can't be a gatekeeper. And I feel it's a slippery slope. It's a gray area, but I just ultimately decided that this was just not appropriate. But for those of you who are intrigued, who do enjoy Eli Roth's work, this is a great opportunity in the comments down below to defend it and to point out to me, I hope respectfully, what I'm not getting and why you do enjoy this stuff, even though obviously I'm sure you would never act on it and have no interest in doing it yourself. All right, so that's the first story of the day. The second story is that Noah is actually starting to pick up some Oscar steam, which I find very interesting because it's been quite the controversial film. It's doing okay at the box office. I think it's probably going to break even because it's so prohibitively expensive. That's a whole other discussion about how expensive these movies are getting. It's almost impossible for them to turn a profit. But anyway, Paramount is really already beginning to push Noah as an Oscar contender. That's because it was leaked to Deadline. Another studio said they got an email saying that Paramount had sent out an email to all of the guild members, and often guild members are who make up the Academy voters. So they sent out letters saying, if you take this email and print it out and take it along with your guild card or maybe Academy membership card to, I believe, an AMC or a Cinemark or an ArcLight in the cities where ArcLight theaters exist, Paramount will pay for you to see Noah. And people were commenting the gist of the story on Deadline was that this is April and you already have a film campaigning for Oscars to get out in front. But I also think it's interesting whether or not the Oscars, I think the story, we can develop it further as to whether or not the Oscars are going to want to take on such a controversial film. This film, as I said in my review, I thought it was genuinely moving. I thought that if you just had faith in it, which of course goes hand in hand with religion, eventually that faith was rewarded, and I thought it was a fascinating film that was a very modern look at religion. Quite a modern look. We've been very forward thinking, not only to the stories of the Bible, but just how religion in general is approached by society. You can go check out that review if you want my full thoughts on it. I'll put a link at the end of this video. But I feel quite strongly that it was a very good film. And I have to say, well, I did consider it an Oscar contender because I've been programmed to think of, these films coming out at the end of the year, except if it's a Woody Allen movie or a small independent film that's made the festival circuit, not a big commercial movie that hit theaters right away in like huge thousands of theaters. So I would not think that Noah would be a potential contender. But as soon as this was said to me, I was like, you know what? If I were an Academy voter, I would be tempted to vote for it. Now, that's just me personally because I thought the film was quite impressive, and I thought Darren Aronofsky was quite bold in his vision as an artist, and as in terms of addressing society. And that's what good art does, I guess, which is what I said in my review to some degree. But I think that this is a very controversial film that really upset a lot of people. I remember reading from a number of you. Some of you were actually very angry about it. I remember some people writing that there were signs at their local box office saying that Noah was a very loose interpretation of the Bible. It took a lot of liberties to warn ticket buyers, I guess because the box office found itself having to offer a lot of refunds. So, obviously the Academy Awards, they're aired on television. They want to have good ratings. And also, Hollywood has a very delicate relationship with its audience, and particularly the Christian audience. As you can see, there are more and more films coming out. Heaven is for Real just opened yesterday. God's Not Dead is doing quite well at the box office. And Rick Santorum, I believe, just announced that he's going to start developing films that will play first run in churches, both as an effort to, give further material to people who are already attending church, and maybe as a way, some people are saying, to get people to go to church to see these films, because that's where they're going to play exclusively. So it's very interesting how that part of the business is developing. Will Hollywood want to, potentially endanger that with nominations for Noah? Now, someone might argue, well, they're giving attention to a religious film, right? But I think more people would want to see God's Not Dead up there. The only problem is that God's Not Dead, I think, still hasn't reached the professional levels necessary to really find itself in the Oscar race, where, of course, Noah is a very expensive, well-produced film starring Russell Crowe, Jennifer Connelly, I believe two Oscar winners for A Beautiful Mind, Darren Aronofsky from Black Swan. It has the talent pool there that the Oscars can point to that and say, yes, we feel comfortable that's an Oscar nominee and potentially even a winner. But I'm just curious to how you feel. If the Oscars were to seriously consider Noah as an Oscar contender and were to get nominations and potentially wins, would that be a deal breaker for you? Would you be so upset that you would be like, you know what, I'm going to take a break from movies, or I'm not going to watch the Oscars? Or would you be game to see where this went? And also, for those of you who've seen Noah, can you understand Paramount thinking of it as an Oscar contender? Do you see that yourself? And what would you do as an Academy voter? Where and what categories do you think it might be able to compete? Some people said it should just go into special effects and such, and cinematography. I don't know about that. I thought the writing was very good. I thought Russell Crowe's performance was quite good. And I think Aronofsky would definitely deserve a nod for director because of his vision, which definitely was a vision. All right, so that's the second story of the day. The third story of the day is quite interesting, and that's that Dee Myers, former press secretary for the Clinton administration, has been hired as the new head of publicity and public relations for Warner Brothers. And that was a very big deal. It was all over the industry trades yesterday, and it was what really caught me about the article, the coverage, was that it said she was going to be the new spokesperson for Warner Brothers. Now, of course, I think that's largely within the industry and in business purposes. She'll be like that, just like a press secretary is for the White House. Press secretary comes out, answers all the press questions, has a very good relationship back and forth with them as the White House's liaison. So I guess that's what Dee Myers is going to do for Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers, as we all know, is making a lot of bold moves, very exciting moves, and so they want somebody who's not only going to from behind the scenes, it looks like, get that out to the press and tell Warner Brothers' story as they'd like it to be told, but to be the face of that. Certainly, at least, as I said, with the press and with and businesses, and within the industry, and industry to industry, I guess. B2B is the term, business to business. But then, when they said spokesperson, it reminded me of Walt Disney and how he's really been the only spokesperson, public spokesperson to the general public for any entertainment studio. And he was quite effective because, obviously it was the Walt Disney Studio. It was his vision that was being put out there, and he was the best person to speak to it. That's not really the case anywhere else, obviously. Multiple people work on films and work in studios, and, Michael Eisner tried to step into Walt's shoes, but obviously was unsuccessful. And so you don't really see any one person personifying any other studios ever besides Walt Disney. But as I said, he was quite effective, and I think it went a long way to making people have a personal relationship with the Disney studio, and a cozy factor that you don't really see with any of the other studios. So Jeannie Myers, I'm sure she'll do a very interesting, great job. She's a great hire, great resume. It was, I believe, someone who, on the West Wing, was someone who gave them advice and was a consultant, that's the term. So I think this is very exciting for Warner Brothers. And I also like the fact that it continues to show that Warner Brothers is thinking outside the box. I think that's great. But it really did give me this idea of, do you think that studios should have a mainstream public spokesperson who speaks to moviegoers? Would that be something you'd be interested in? And who should it be? Should they hire an outside party? I think it should be the executives. I would love to hear Kevin Tsujihara speak to the public. I mean, he speaks quite a bit, obviously, in business circles, but would you be interested in Kevin Tsujihara sitting down? I mean, I guess Kevin Feige to some degree does this over for Marvel Studios. That's not a studio, even though that's in the title. They're a production shingle over at Disney. Kevin Feige to some degree has become that face, not to the degree of Walt Disney. I mean, Walt Disney wasn't. Kevin Feige does it through interviews. Walt Disney had produced segments where he was promoting what the studio was doing. Would you like Warner Brothers to produce a segment where Kevin Tsujihara came out and talked to you about what was planned, much like he comes out and talks to the shareholders? Would you like to be involved in that? Disney, again, going back to Disney has their own convention, the D23 Expo, where they have their executives come out with talent and discuss what's going on. But then again, that's not widely publicized. It's for ticket holders, Disneyana fans, hardcore Disney fans who come to see that. But again, not very much for the public, not to the way that Walt Disney was on television every Sunday night in the world of color, right in your living room, telling you about what he had planned next. Would you like to see that from other studios? It could certainly be done on YouTube at this point, and I'm just curious, if you would like to see it, who you would like to see do it. Do you want Thomas Tull to come out from Legendary and talk about what he has planned? I think it's very interesting, and I would be very interested in it. I guess we're a little bit biased if you're a fan of this channel because we discuss the business side of Hollywood so much. But corporate versus public spokesperson, discussed down below. All right, so that leads into actually the viewer question. This is from Alex Cassis, and it involves Walt Disney, who we just discussed, who was a pioneer in many ways. I mean, again, we always discuss, and it always comes up now whenever Walt Disney is discussed, that he had his faults. And of course he did. Some of them, it's regrettable. He was a product of his times, et cetera, but I really don't think it should negate all that the man did. I don't think that we should ignore it, but everybody is multifaceted and nobody is a perfect individual, and that ratio is different in everyone. And even if Walt's is not great in some regards, and some of the things that he did, I think that the anti-Semitism and the misogyny are taken out of context and probably magnified today because people get angry. I don't think that they were I think they were there, but I don't think they're to the degree that people try and depict after his death, which is not fair because he's not there to defend himself and really doesn't have anybody left to defend him. But anyway, that's we're going off track. Let's get to Alex's question. Alex Cassis says, "Hello, Grace," smiley face. "I recently stumbled upon a movie poster entitled Walt Before Mickey, and apparently it's a biography movie is being made about Walt Disney before he made it big. What are your thoughts on this project, and do you think it'll be successful at telling the story of Walt? Keep up the great work. Love your show. Thanks, Alex." Thank you, Alex. Walt Disney, as we were just discussing here, he is a fascinating individual. I've said before, there are some excellent Walt Disney biographies. If you're interested in learning more about Walt Disney, I'll put a link in the video description to where you can purchase one. They're very good. I think at one point everybody should read. I was into biographies quite a bit at one point, and Walt Disney was one of the biographies that I read. And he's had a fascinating life before Mickey in particular. The way he was finding his way, animation was not a big thing. It obviously isn't what it is today. And also he had the horrible situation where he lost Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, his very first creation, and that's why he had to create Mickey. And of course there's that French movie poster that depicted Ryan Gosling playing a young Walt Disney and on that fateful train ride where he went cross-country from New York back to LA after losing Oswald and came up with Mickey, that got a lot of people's attention. But this is not that film. This is a very low-budget movie, very low budget, to the point where it reminds me of kind of like the Ashton Kutcher Steve Jobs biography, where it was kind of made outside of Hollywood, and someone kind of beat Hollywood to the punch of depicting a very famous person, and I think maybe didn't do a great job. Now that said, though, Jobs was surprisingly solid. I gave that a pretty good review. I thought it was not bad. And as you might recall, I didn't have very high hopes for Saving Mr. Banks because I didn't think Tom Hanks was well cast, but it ended up being my favorite movie of 2013. And that was a very good depiction of Walt Disney, and I thought a very accurate one. It showed his dark side as well as his good side. So I really recommend Saving Mr. Banks. It's out on Blu-ray and streaming right now. If you haven't seen it, you really should check it out. I highly recommend it. But anyway, this movie stars Thomas Ian Nichols as Walt Disney and John Heder from Napoleon Dynamite, or John Heder, I'm not quite sure how he pronounces his last name, as Roy Disney, his brother in the business brains. Walt was the creative, Roy handled the business. John Heder would have actually been a great Walt Disney, so I think he's very miscast, and that really misrepresents the dynamic between the two of them. Roy was, I believe, a little bit shorter than Roy Disney, and they were just, than Walt Disney. I think that John Heder is so much bigger. I looked at some of the photographs on IMDb, and it just is wrong. Now, again, I got into this trap before. I said that Tom Hanks didn't look like Walt Disney. He ended up doing a great job. So, to the credit of these actors, perhaps they will get the dynamic down in their own way. But I just feel that because the production looks so low budget, and the fact that they're not paying attention to the fact it looks so low budget. We see plenty of low budget films that look quite good. Oculus just came out. It was made for $5 million. It looks super professional. So anytime a film is made that isn't looking super professional, and if this was a great script and it had a great director and it really had something here that was special, they probably, I would think, would have been able to attract better talent. With all due respect to this talent, but this is not the kind of group that's going to carry a film. Now, smaller films are doing well. God's Not Dead, the biggest name on that is Dean Cain and Kevin Sorbo, and people went to see that. But that has the religious factor. I just don't see this movie doing very well. I would love to see Ryan Gosling play a young Walt Disney. I think he's perfectly cast, and he's not too busy these days. And so I think that Disney Corporation, while they might feel to some degree the Disney studio that they did depict Walt Disney in Saving Mr. Banks, there's another one of these properties also, Alex, that's being worked on, another Disney biography. They really need to get in there and make this movie to help define it before people see these films. We were hoping to get a David Fincher, Steve Jobs biography. Obviously, as you might have heard, he just dropped out of that over, the rumor is an argument over his salary. We'll see if that's the case, or if maybe he'll come back on. But that film that was hopefully was going to star Christian Bale, it was beginning to shape up to be quite exciting. It's now gone. So it looks like the Ashton Kutcher one is the only one we're going to have when it comes to Steve Jobs. But as I said, it's okay. This movie would be lucky, Walt before Mickey, to be as good as the Jobs biography. So we'll see. I'm curious to how you guys feel. Does professionalism and that Hollywood sheen mean anything to you? Would you be willing to give this movie a chance? Because I'm saying the biggest fault here isn't just the level of the talent and what the career level they're at, but that their lack of understanding that they seem to be putting out a product that looks cheap. I don't understand why they don't look at the dailies and go, this doesn't look like a professional film. So anyway, and what do you think of this? Do you think that the Disney studio needs to act fast before they let others define Walt Disney? And are you guys interested in the story of Walt Disney even? Is there a market for that? Because if you've read the book, if you're interested in it, you've obviously sought out the biography and you've already read that. Do you want to see a movie version of it? I would like to, actually. As for me, my answer would be I'd like to see a movie version, but I want to see it well done and something that's respectful of Walt Disney, because as we were just discussing, he's a multifaceted, very dynamic individual, and it's a delicate rope, line to walk. Again, just like Eli Roth's walking a delicate line over there with, torture porn and cannibalism and the privileged youth. We have a very fine line here about what it was like to be a businessman and a person and a white male in the 1940s, 1930s to 1960s America, and the people who were the product of those times. And all that entailed. All right, so I'm just curious to how you guys feel. Alex, those are my thoughts on the biography. Thank you for your question. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. Please write down below what you think of today's 3 top stories and the viewer question and what you'd like to see covered tomorrow and any questions you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.